Hello everyone and welcome. Welcome to this research poster presentation overview. This research poster presentation for BTS and the this research poster presentation is in on the theme looking at decolonizing and diversifying transplant immunobiology through laboratory medicine and social media, and where this research poster presentation is an overview. So to begin with some intro. So immunology, that is the immune system, has a basis wherein homeostasis exists through a certain subset wherein pathophysiology is as self and a particular fraction of the rest of the immune system as foreign. Specifically, the immune system can be classified into four categories. Firstly, visible self, where visible self is where there's bodily structures to which the immune system is tolerant. Secondly, there is invisible self, where the bodily structures to which it is not tolerant, but to which it is but to which it is but to which it does not normally respond. Thirdly, visible non-self, a structure to which the immune system normally responds. And fourthly, invisible non-self, where there's non-immunogenic or non-immunogenic or non-immune structures to which it does not respond. Now looking at a T cell in around T cell activation, allo recognition, and allo response in transplantation. So in a non-self models or modalities, T cells must be able to distinguish a difference between foreign and self antigens. In an immune system poised for danger, for example, T cells need only to identify antigen presenting cells or APCs from everything else. Specifically, if any T cell specific APC antigen presenting cell antigen were omitted, and if APCs were the only cells able to activate T cells, the only T cells that are stimulated during an immune response would be those specific for new antigens presented by antigen presenting cells. Initial recognition of processed antigen by T cells is through an antigen receptor. Accessory molecules interlink antigen presenting cells and the T cell, thus leading to a stronger cell interaction. For example, a CD4 being a component of the immune system, also referred in lay literature or amongst literature as a T helper cell. CD4 binds to the constant region domain of class 2 major histocompatibility complex molecules or MHC molecules, while CD8 being a component of the immune system, which is referred to as cytotoxic T cell or the cytotoxic T cells, and where and so whilst CD8 binds to class 1 MHC major histocompatibility complex molecules. CD4 positive T cells can differentiate down at least two pathways to become inflammatory T helper cells, i.e., for example, T helper type 1 cells or T helper type 2 cells, which assist B cells. T helper type 1 cells are predominantly involved mediating inflammatory immune complexes through activation of macrophages, whilst T helper type 2 cells are primarily involved in the introduction of humoral immunity through the activation of B cells. T helper type 1 cells also produce cytokines that primarily act on macrophages. So, for example, interferon gamma, and tumor necrosis factor alpha. Whilst T helper type 2 cells are involved mainly in B cell differentiation and maturation through, for example, different interleukins. For example, interleukin 4, interleukin 5, and interleukin 6. Now I look at sort of the intracellular signaling pathways in T cell activation before going in before highlighting sort of the aims and objectives of this research poster presentation. So the lymphocyte endothelial interactions depend on the expression of appropriate target antigens on the endothelium. Human leukocyte antigen class 1 antigens are constitutively expressed at the cell surface, whereas human leukocyte antigen class 2 antigen expression must be induced by various cytokines, especially interferon gamma. Furthermore, adhesion molecules such as intracellular adhesion molecule and vascular adhesion molecule ICAM and VCAM, respectively, integrins and selectins, which also play a critical role amongst cell surface interactions between lymphocytes and endothelial cells and activations. Such molecules release cytokines and release sort of cytokines and inflammatory mediators. These processes lead to sort of a movement or migration of lymphocytes or T cells, specific white blood cells or T lymphocytes through the vascular wall, leading to inflammation. Now look at sort of the aims and objectives. So to provide the base of this research poster presentation is to provide or offer a retrospective overview of chemokine and chemokine expression in amongst acute allograft rejection or AAR, but also aligned to additionally where the aims and objectives look to be met by highlighting how social media organizations such as the RPSG since 2009 and KDARS since 2014 have looked to encourage healthcare inclusivity to bridge healthcare disparities and decolonize essential topics in transplant immunobiology and cross-laboratory practice to enhance patient and public involvement, or PPI. So the importance of now looking at sort of the importance of interleukin and co-stimulation in transplantation. So laboratory investigations have informed that in human transplantation or around transplantation, there are alternative pathways that promote the development of pro-trafficking phenotypes of T cells in recipients that have received, for example, have received sort of pharmacotherapeutics such as anti-CD25. Retrospective hypothesis had been addressed using a T cell culture system to analyze the effects of anti-CD25 on the expression of chemokine receptor CXCR3 and other important chemokine receptors on the surface of T cells. In acute allograft rejection AAR in context of transplant immunology, from the early millennia, there have been sort of intrigue surrounding most essential interleukins in transplantation, such as interleukin 2 and interleukin 15, which have been cited in several works. Interleukin 2 also known or referred to as T cell growth factor, or TGF. It is secreted and stimulated through helper T cells, for example, CD4. Through CD4 and cytotoxic T cells, for example, where CD8 T cells can be and are at the same time involved. Additionally to where where CD4 cells and B cells are activated, and where that activation leads to macrophages and oligodendrocytes. So whilst the generation of IST agents or pharmacotherapeutics, immunosuppression pharmacotherapeutics have been a merit, have been a sort of a merit of pharmaceutical industries, and across pharmaceutical industries and through laboratory sort of early laboratory investigations, early laboratory research or investigations, the understanding of basic mechanistics of the immune recognition and regulatory networks begins through disease processes in hospital laboratories. T cells can recognize and react against an allograft either directly the direct where there's the direct recognition pathway, or indirect through the indirect recognition pathway. And it has been demonstrated through laboratory investigations that both pathways mediate the growth and the differentiation of antibody producing B cells that contribute to acute and chronic rejection. However, both pathways can be initiated by subsets of specialized T cells which display regulatory and suppressor function. TR cells TR cells or T receptor cells display a characteristic of CD4 positive CD4 positive and CD25 positive phenotype, and act as a sort of a neutral inhibitors of T cell reactivity to autoantigens. Now looking at transplantation and healthcare practices. So apart from sort of co-stimulation and human transplantation, there have been works postulating an integral sort of role or basis of the immune regulation for transplant tolerance, identified across for example in rat laboratory investigations. The investigators have informed that tolerance in rodent models, in rodent investigations, can often be adaptively transferred by lymphocytes for long-term survivors in naive secondary test recipients. Secondly, the maintenance of immunological tolerance require persistence of donor antigen. Third, cellular infiltrates containing a large portion of T cells can be frequently found in tolerant allografts. In some such cases, recipients are not prescribed. In some such cases, recipients are not or may not be prescribed IST or immunosuppression pharmacotherapy. Clinical immunologists, that is the specialists in amongst laboratory divisions, have been searching for a full explanation of tolerance for over 3 decades, if not more, to help improve the acceptance of transplanted organs. Tolerance prevents the immune system from attacking self. Self-tolerance can be partly explained by the destruction of self-tissue by T cells that react to self-antigens, but some self-reactive T cells slip through the destruction process, killing tissue in context of immunobiology. So convinced an antigen-specific mechanism of tolerance exists, laboratory investigations had developed for sort of historically or retrospectively, and found found sort of a different set of T cells. These TR cells, or T sort of receptor cells, TR cells, induce tolerance after recognizing antigens on the surface on the surface of another type of immune cell, immune cell against dendritic cells, or DC cells, which process and present antigens to T cells, inducing TR cells, TH cells, and TC cells. After recognition, TR cells then rob DC cells, dendritic cells, the ability to activate T helper cells and TC cells to respond to the same antigen. So without active T helper cell and T killer cells, the only immune response to the antigen is placed. The immune response, is then where the immune response to an antigen is placed on hold. The stress effects on immunity seem to be mediated through also endocrine factors such as hormones, particular hormones, neurotransmitters, and neuropeptides, which can interact with cellular components of the immune system, thus also priming a transplant for acceptance and or tolerance by a recipient. Now looking at debunking and mentoring healthcare service users and providers. Although research has provided valuable insights into the way recipients or patients use healthcare services, it is also important to appreciate insight into the type of stresses experienced by both patients and healthcare professionals owing to advances in devices and owing to the advances in, for example, such as through tech and devices, but also through where the majority of solid organ transplanted recipients have access to EPRs, or electronic patient records, and literature also informs that patients and professionals have variations in digital and health literacy skills and in differences in attitudes towards communicating with healthcare or through healthcare, and typically recipients can still have challenges regarding the implications of laboratory and pathology investigations. In context of debunking and mentoring healthcare service users in the remit around the theme of this research poster presentation, answers to laboratory medicine based questions could be better supported, involving allied health professionals and healthcare laboratory professionals from laboratory medicine and pathology. In addition, where laboratory healthcare specialists who can provide or offer real-time and evidence-based understanding between healthcare sectors would be of advantage. At present, addressing issues from and through professional collaborations is more constructive to prevent disparities in healthcare, such as how EPRs are used, electronic patient records are used, rather than how social media or online spaces and EPRs together could become more important in context of addressing such aspects pertaining to health and illness. And as part of the discussion, one of the main mechanisms or mechanistics to support recipients or patients and healthcare professionals take a greater intrigue surrounding surrounding in around the practices of solid organ transplantation have been somewhat implemented. These have included public health initiatives aimed at intriguing shared decision making and co-development to increase the number of healthcare decisions where both professionals, where both patients and professionals are involved. Investigations in the role of chemokines and mediation of acute allograft rejection is still challenging, primarily because of the unsatisfactory nature of laboratory representation of acute allograft rejection. However, social media platforms as space have importance and prompt sort of inclusive healthcare practices and invite recipients and patients or recipients and healthcare professionals and researchers to co-develop between healthcare between aspects of research and healthcare practices. So in amongst the conclusion, the importance of decolonization of immunobiological practices and laboratory medicine, including patient perspectives surrounding the serological investigation, had not been conveyed within literature works in any specific detail. So to decolonize and diversify such healthcare and scientific themes surrounding evidence-based practices through social media should, however, implement and encourage PPI, or patient and public involvement, laboratory medicine and clinical practice alliances. Somewhat relating, the RPSG and CADARS platforms have published some recent research to inform, for example, what CKD, chronic kidney disease healthcare educational themes are most pertinent or important to patients, but also by way of bringing healthcare disparities and inequalities, by also way of bridging healthcare disparities and inequalities, prompting more inclusive practices. Finally, it is important to recognize that healthcare professionals, academics, and patients have different motivations to challenge disparities when encouraging best practices surrounding healthcare. Patients or recipients vary in skills, knowledge, and confidence to approach healthcare. One example would be to envisage patients or recipients and healthcare professionals who are determined to co-develop and integrate healthcare services to also envisage quality collaborative efforts. Both RPSG and CADARS have prompted collaborative practice, highlighting the importance of patient and healthcare professional co-developing efforts. That draws this research poster presentation overview to a close. This poster presentation on decolonizing and diversifying transplant immunobiology through laboratory medicine and social media, and where this research poster presentation was for BTS and as an overview. Thank you.